Welcome, Canada. We are live, one day late, and of course, lawyers suing me. Sorry, you were booked off for Wednesday night. You have to come Thursday. But sorry, Daniel did a hate speech. Daniel said Hitler was bad and praising Hitler was bad, and that's a big-time hate speech these days. So I just want to say, haha, Facebook, I'm still here, even though I still have a strong anti-Hitler and anti-killing all the Jews stance. Despite that, Facebook tried to stop me. So 7-day ban. Because of that, we had to restructure it to Thursday just so someone else could stream it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm here. And Joe Biden is also here. And the world is a much, much better place with Joe Biden because there are no more angry tweets, right? No more angry tweets. We just got, Biden with the best tweets ever. Just, yes, energy prices are soaring. Yes, hyperinflation's on the way. Yes, the jobs report, which was supposed to be amazing, is now abysmal. Yes, the Middle East is in chaos, but at least he isn't orange. He's not orange. Yeah, and sanity's back in the White House. Sure, sanity. That's what we'll call it. All right. So the first part of it, we'll do this. There's a bit of an update in the Israel stuff, but we've gone into that so much. So I'll leave the last block of the show, like the last 10 minutes. And what we'll do, instead of just going over, yes, there's ground troops going on. I'll do a quick thing, but I figure it'd be more productive if people don't know things, a conflict. If you just want to ask specific questions about Israel, Palestine, the Arab states, anything in the region, if you have a specific question you want someone to answer, like why do they always do this? I'll leave the last 10 minutes for just specific Q&A on that, just so you can decide what the last 10 minutes are and the questions answered there. So that's what that will be. All right. Now, getting into the fun. Hyperinflation is coming. Hyperinflation is already here. So, prices on everything is going up. And this is basically being caused by the fact that, a lot of things. I mean, spending on everything, right? If you just overspend on blow out the budget, right? You're going to, and try and pump artificial money into the economy, right? So this is what the left fails to fundamentally understand, okay? Wealth and money are not the same thing, right? And I'm gonna get the cryptocurrency and the gold crowd are gonna agree with me on this. Wealth, as I always say, is a human psychotechnology that quantifies debt in the evolutionary framework. So the debt we have between two of us, right? So I don't mean like debt as in student debt. I mean in sort of like the debt we feel to each other. So in the barter system, right, you have people who, a guy fixes your roof, you feel indebted to them, a social debt to them, so you give them boots. Or, the evolutionary scale of debt is like, someone looks after your kids for an afternoon. That's a kindness. So you feel in debt for them, so you're more likely to do them a favor, right? But in order to sort of quantify debt and scale it so that we can have commerce that goes outside the community, because again, you're not going to have debt to someone else if they live a village over or 2 villages over, or someone's just passing through from another country, right? It's hard to sort of feel a debt to some visitor from Finland. So we have a universal monetary system that sort of quantifies debt, all right? And as you make, as you create more wealth, that has value, and that value is then given in money. So this is what money is, all right? Which means when you just hand out money to everyone, you give universal basic income, or you give unlimited benefits for nothing forever, what you are doing is you are just pumping more money into the system, but you're not pumping more value into the system, okay? Wealth creation is value creation, right? You find a more efficient way of smelting iron. You're creating value because you're taking raw materials and you're putting it in a position that it can be used to build something else. That is value in the economy. You're performing a service. That is specific value notations. You are then rewarded with money. Money is then quantified debt. You can use the money to exchange for different things, okay? We have a universal system. When you just pump money into the system and give people money for nothing, doing nothing creates no value. So pumping more money into it deflates the value of the money already out there, because you cannot artificially create wealth. You can artificially give people money. That's not the same thing as creating wealth. And what Biden is doing is just giving people money. So you get $1,000 a month, or Yang Gang. What is that? The Yang Gang, $1,200 a month, $1,000 a month, whatever it is. X amount you give everyone a month. The Yang Gang, UBI, whatever, Jagmeet Singh wants to do next. You give people this quantity of money and you're just putting it there. Well, then that actually isn't value. You're just saying, well, this is the value of nothing is now X, right? And X, you could say $1,000 a month. So if everyone gets $1,000 a month, it's not whatever. It's like, everyone now has more money. So, the cost, the value of doing a service. So, if you have $1,000, let's say in the bank, what is the value of doing an hour of labor, right? If you say, the value is really, X, right? Right. This is actually the minimum wage thing. Like, this is a minimum wage, but it's simple. If the value of labor is like, let's say X, and X equals 10, right? $10 an hour, right? Well, now if you have everyone that gets $1,000 in the bank, well, then people are going to want more, right? Naturally, to do a standard hour of labor. Okay, so now it's 11, but the value of the labor has not been increased because you're still doing the same thing. So what you have done then is you have taken X from 10 and you've moved it up to 11 just across the board. Well, now if you've artificially increased the value of work, you also then artificially have increased the product of that work, right? Because part of what a product pricing is, it calculates how much labor was put in. So if you're artificially increasing the price of labor through either minimum wage increases or universal basic income, you're then increasing the price, right? So now the price has gone up, right? And now that the price has gone up, the cost of living is now increased. So yes, we can give everyone, $20 an hour minimum wage. But if your average grocery bill for groceries, say someone living on minimum wage, the average grocery bill per month is $150 a month, you increase their minimum wage, right? And then they're making more money. But if the average grocery bill goes up to $250 a month and their rent goes up, another $300 a month, and they end up will end up paying more to live than the wage increase can provide. And some people, and let's say you take certain people out of the workforce. Now, here's where it benefits low income workers, is if certain people get laid off. So if you have machines take over certain work, right? So more people are out of a job, right? Then you have unemployment, then you have to cover them with unemployment benefits and homelessness and all that. But in that case, then that's how they keep the labor costs down. So the only way to win this is if half your friends get fired, you maintain your job at a artificially increased wage, and then this way the increased cost of living will actually be slightly lower than your increased wages, and you win, but that's short term, because then the inflation will keep running away, and then eventually you either end up in a job or hyperinflation continues. So this is why it's absolute nonsense. And this is the Biden plan. It's print money, just print money into the abyss. Just money, just print it everywhere. You need money, I need money, everyone needs money, just print it money into the abyss. And this is literally what the Canadian government is doing. If you look at, Pierre Poilievre is the only one really talking about this. And it drives me crazy that Erin O'Toole and no one else in the Conservative Party can talk about this. But the number one source of income for the Canadian government last year, more than 50% of our income came from the federal government's printing bank, which means we just printed a bunch of money and then gave it to ourselves. Like, do you think that's a good idea? Like, remember the Weimar Republic when people were just buying, breads with wheelbarrows full of cash, right? When you print billions and billions and billions of dollars, you are deflating the value of the fiat currency you're trying to help out. Now, you can't do any of this and have it work out, but you can kind of do this sporadically in a few little moments here and there to sort of, let's say, cover a few balance sheets in very, very short terms, if you're then going to have sound policy and pay it off later. Like, there is an argument to be made for, printing more money, a little bit more money in very, very hyper-specific circumstances sometimes to cover some things. But as an actual financial plan, like over a year, for years really with the Trudeau government, it's insanity. It's an economic death spiral. You're going to deflate the value of your currency, because what is the value of printing money? What is the wealth created? There's nothing created there, right? So it doesn't actually increase the value, which I say is quantifiable debt or wealth or whatever it is, right? Wealth. And people asking, do I mean Biden or Trudeau? It's both at this point. It's both. This is what Trudeau's been doing for the last 2 years, and this is what Biden's been doing for the last 100 days. It's the exact same policy. It's going to have the exact same results, right? So you saw hyperinflation coming in Canada. You're now seeing it coming into America, and it hitting the American economy is going to spiral the rest of the world, because the American economy is a central global economy. The Canadians can go screw around and mess up our own economy. It's going to stay mostly within Canada. But if the Americans do this, it's going to destabilize the entire world after it affects America. So now we're getting, the inflation from our own government and the inflation from the Biden government, and the Americans getting inflation from the Biden government. This is why it's probably a good time to listen. If you're a boomer, you might want to invest in precious metals, okay? And if you're a Gen Z and or a millennial and you don't, what is precious metals? Think of it like Bitcoin, but like in physical, like shiny, Bitcoin that exists in real world, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but it's like a real world and it's like gold or silver and it shines and it has value like that because we, it's not fiat, it's not inflatable, it's not a fiat currency. You can't manipulate the supply of gold and silver. It's finite. Now, if you're a millennial Gen Z, you might want to invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. And if you're a boomer and you don't know what that is, cryptocurrencies, it's basically like gold or silver, but like computerish. Like it's a do. So, it's essentially the same thing. They're both hedges against inflation because they're not centrally controlled fiat currencies, which can be inflated and manipulated by central banks and governments, right? So there's a stable supply, which means they will do much better under inflationary circumstances because they're stable, right? And they're hedges against inflation than fiat currencies. Now, if you have tons of fiat currency, go for it. Have it. You want to do something, but this is coming down the line, and even like major Canadian investors and major American banks are now advising their customers that expect inflation to be coming. Okay, so here's where we're at. We're at a point in America where like it's bad. Okay, you have massive inflation numbers. Prices are going to go up. Oh, am I back? I'm back. I think I'm back. Okay. So I'm not sure if we cut out there, but I talk about, okay, so gas shortages across the states. This is the result of a colonial pipeline hack. Let me just make sure we're still live. So yes, the colonial pipeline was hacked. And am I still live? Okay, there we are, still live. Okay, so colonial was hacked. Not Biden's fault. Now, this 100% would be Donald Trump's fault had Donald Trump been president right now, according to the New York Times. However, it's a private company. It's not Biden's fault that there's a hack and you have basically slowdowns, across the states. But what is Joe Biden's fault is the fact that there is a protracted war against good energy sources in favor of fairy tale energy, green energy, if you want to call it that. So what is making things worse and what is exacerbating shortages and fears of supply demands, and had Trump been president, you would not see massive surges probably right now and less panic buying because there would be a sense of stability from the energy industry long term. However, Biden is threatening the long-term stability of the energy supply by saying stupid things like we need more wind and solar. And listen, if you want to drive me crazy, right, you can either, take over a political party, affiliate with the Muslim Brotherhood, and then claim to stand up for Canadian values. You could do that. But considering Erin O'Toole and Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh already beat you to that, I don't know if there's another political party for you to corrupt that I would even care about at this point. So that's off the table. So the only other way to drive me crazy right now is to talk about the values of green energy, because it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Wind and solar power, it's stupid. It's stupid. Maybe in certain circumstances, you can have wind energy along the coast, but these wind turbines are not, they last at most 20 years. They need coal to be made. They're at best 20 to 30% efficient in Ontario. They don't really create energy. They can't really store energy. They're all propped up by natural gas or nuclear energy. If we want to talk about clean energy and you want to get off fossil fuels, I will respect people who talk about advances in nuclear technology and saying, listen, we need to switch to more nuclear tech and cleaner, newer nuclear tech. I'm willing to have that conversation. I think it's totally valid. If you're like, hey, listen, we got to talk about, resources, and you listen, if you want to talk about green energy and you don't bring up the value of nuclear energy, you're not an honest actor and you don't know what you're talking about. These green energy nonsense projects are simply ways, it's ways to funnel money. It's a wealth transfer system. It's a way to transfer wealth from the common people to the corporations and the billionaire class. And I hate it because this is like the entire modern left in North America is sort of built along this sort of what they would call anti-capitalist lines. And what they really mean by capitalism is cronyism. And the left's critique of capitalism is a fair critique of crony capitalism or cronyism, which is the fact that, politicians get into office and they would say it's just Republicans or conservatives, and they love business so much and they hate poor people that they end up giving tax breaks and bailouts to the major corporations at the cost of the little guy. And I do hate this too. I hate corporate subsidies, okay? Now, what they will not tell you, though, is that, in Ontario under Kathleen Wynne, like the reason why we had to give massive corporate subsidies to companies like Honda is because we had such insane corporate taxes that it made no sense to keep your shops open in Ontario, that all the companies just wanted to leave because it was more expensive to run a company than to stay in Canada. So they just wanted to move somewhere else. So in order to stop them from moving somewhere else because of all their insane taxes, we then had to give them hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate subsidies to stay. And then people got mad at that, so we increased the taxes on them, which we said, okay, fine, now we're just going to leave. So then we have to increase the subsidies, and then there's a loss in the government corruption siphon. So it was just stupidity compounding upon stupidity, compounding upon stupidity. But this is now the mantra of the left. So you have green energy, which the left says they hate corporate capitalism and corporate cronyism. Fair enough, we all do. But the liberals in Ontario, especially, and the liberals in Canada, and now the Democrats, they're the kings of this. And there is nothing that is more corrupt, cronyistic than the green energy sector. There is nothing worse whereas like what the left would call capitalism, which is just like government funding corporations, which isn't capitalism, it's cronyism and corruption. They call that capitalism. But there is no one worse at this than left-wing politicians and green energy giants. So the green energy sector is not really, like, you think it's like your hippie cousin Steve who created a reactor, a new solar panel in his backyard, and he's doing his best and he's getting the government money. No, the people who get government money for green energy projects are usually the richest corporations in the world. Like, it was like over 90% of the subsidies in Ontario went to the top 500 companies in the world for wind energy. Like, we were giving billions of dollars a year to Samsung to build wind farms because Samsung really wants to save the planet. And then the other insane thing is they'd say, well, the reason why we have to do this is we have to incentivize innovation. That is not how you incentivize innovation. Subsidies do not incentivize innovation. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay. So I'm asking, how about lumber? Lumber is a different thing. I mean, softwood lumber and like, are we talking about like the lumber industry, which is like we need wood and softwood to build things, or like that stupid like biomass energy, which is just burning of trees instead of oil? It's stupid. Okay, nuclear energy is not create energy. I assume you mean clean energy. Whenever there's a big breakdown or meltdown, it's a huge disaster. Yeah, but look at it's all the reactors that have melted down are the old type reactors. What is it? The new fusion ion reactors haven't melted down. The thorium reactors haven't melted down. And Ontario is the safest place for nuclear reactors. Like, Ontario is one of the most disaster-proof areas in the world. It's the second most disaster-proof area in the entire world behind the Australian outback. And this is the cost-benefit analysis, okay? So yes, pipelines can break. You know what? Yes, reactors can melt down. Yes, dams can fail. All of there are risks with everything, okay? But it's all risk reward. Like, listen, the pipe dream that the left sells you, and one of the worst things about the modern world and modern propaganda is we're told that we're sold an idea that things must be perfect, that there is a best way forward, and that our way is better, and the people who disagree with us are bad, and they have a bad way. And very few people are willing to tell you the hard truth, which is your way might be the best way, and mine might be the best way, but it's not perfect. Anything you do on a political level, anything that is ultimately political, is a cost-benefit analysis. So, even if someone you love, like me, who has the best show every Wednesday, now Thursday night, right? And you're going to love and share, and you like and share, and you hit the subscribe, and blah, 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 Patreon and all that, and this is the best show ever. And even if I run for King of Canada, right? I take my armies, I defeat Jagmeet Singh in the Khalistanis, I karate chop Justin Trudeau back into, out of his blackface costume and, off to just surf him. You can just be surfing off the beaches in Indonesia, whatever, right? And now I'm the leader, right? And it's my policies that we all tend to agree with. The hard truth is anything that deals with federal politics, provincial politics, global geopolitics, nothing is perfect. Everything comes with complex externalities. And life is about cost-benefit trade-offs. But what we're sold is a world right now where our ideas are great, and the only reason there are flaws with our ideas is because of the other side, right? So this is the great lie of the left, is like, all these things would have worked and our ideas would have worked had it not, but they weren't right? It's there was no real socialism argument, right? This mentality is the reason why the left keeps trying socialism over and over again. There wasn't socialism, there was Chauvinism, right? There are these perfect ideas. The problem is it wasn't implemented perfectly. There was one flaw here or there, right? It's the inability to deal with the complexities of life. And this is a problem of all politicians and media. You're sold quick, clean, easy solutions. So is nuclear better than green energy as it's sold? Yes, because windmills are stupid and solar panels are stupid and they don't create energy. Like the problem with if wind and solar created energy, whoop-de-doo, they would be great. The problem is with the risk reward is like there's no reward. There's literally no reward from any of these things. It's impossible to even get reward or have anything really fueled by green energy. And the things that are fueled by green energy and wind and solar power, they're all backed up by nuclear energy, natural gas, at some points hydroelectricity, which I get it, like hydro dams are good, but like you can't dam up everything, right? And there's a limit to how much hydroelectrical power you can do. And the best example of this is Iran. So Iran is ruled by a bunch of idiot clerics. Iran is a theocracy ruled by the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah, basically, he is God and he gets to say things. And at one point, I can't remember, it was in the 80s, it might have been in the 90s or something. One of the Ayatollah's advisors just said something like, dams are good, right? Hydroelectricity is the best. And dams create great energy. And he's like, yes, okay, dams. So what they did is they just started damming everything up and putting hydroelectric dams everywhere they could, right? And now there's massive water shortages in Iran because they massively screwed up their irrigation, agricultural, and water supply because they just tried to dam everything, right? So there's a limit to hydroelectricity, which, I mean, I'm not ragging on hydroelectricity, right? You want to build a few dams here and there and get some power plants there, great. But again, the problem is hydroelectricity is not going to solve the world's issues. It can supplement, right? You want to use hydroelectricity to supplement parts of the grid? I'm happy with that. It makes sense. Water flows consistently, right? It's a consistent stream of energy. That's fine. But you can't abuse it, right? And it's inherently, it's not going to be abused, right? If we can find a way to, harness geothermal energy, great. Like I'm all about, like, can we try and figure out, how to use it? Yeah, fine. But with the solar energy, like there's only a limited amount of energy that comes from the sun, yes, it's like a massive fusion reactor in the sky, but it's also 1 billion miles away, right? And there's a limit to how much energy you can even get at maximum from the sun per square inch. And then all these square inches have to be perfectly maintained. It's a pipe dream. It looks nice, it sounds nice, but we keep going on. Okay, so this is the Biden administration. I might be getting a bit off topic. Okay, so you have the Biden administration, which is going actively against friggin' whatever, stable energy sources. So the Biden administration is waging a war on fossil fuels because it's a feel-good, sounds-good thing to do. And when you do this and you undermine the supply long-term and the feelings of supply, when you get something happening like a pipeline hack or Michigan canceling Line 5, you can get massive supply shortages that cause, gas to balloon or more than double in price instantly, have people filling up plastic bags with gas, and it's ridiculous. Jeff Jordan, Gretchen Whitmer threatened Tuesday to go after Enbridge's profits from Great Lakes oil pipeline if the company defies her order to shut it down. Again, this is authoritarianism, right? This is like, I feel like this is bad, right? I feel like this pipeline is bad, right? Because I looked at, I'm not going to look at the risk reward, right? My activists say that there's a potential risk and therefore we must shut it down to virtue signal. And no acknowledgement of the externalities that it would have to shut down these pipelines. And again, you shut down the pipelines, people are going to still need to move oil and gas because you want to build windmills, those windmills need to run off oil and gas too. Those windmills that you want to run and the solar panels you want to run, great, feel good. As long as you're not Ontario and my tax time doesn't have to pay for them. Do what you want. But those things, you have to acknowledge, still need oil and gas. And if you can't transport oil and gas by pipeline, you move them by truck or rail or boat, right? It doesn't stop the stream. And then it costs even more energy to move it because pipeline is the most efficient way to move this, right? So the conversation, if you want to talk about safety and pipelines, whatever, and fossil fuels, it's like we still need fossil fuels, and the way we should mitigate the risks of fossil fuel disasters is have stringent pipeline security and safety measures. So if there was a contract to build a natural resource pipeline in Canada, and you could do it, but the contract says, listen, if Enbridge or whatever the other ones are, if these companies want to build pipelines, yes, you can build pipelines. The risk is for pipelines is companies will be responsible for cleaning up pipeline spills that they own. And there you go, right? If you put the financial incentive on the cleanup on the oil company or the company that builds the pipeline, right? You give them the resources to build the pipeline, then they have, in their best interest is to not let the pipeline spill. And if it does spill, they then have to come clean it up. And nothing's perfect. We can't live in a world that is perfect. We cannot live in a world where nothing bad ever happens. But that is the lie that is being sold to us today. And that is what drives me crazy. Okay, so this is welcome to the life and times of Joe Biden. This is okay. Let's move on to Canada before I get a friggin' aneurysm. Okay, so Erin O'Toole, who loves free speech. Guys, Erin O'Toole loves free speech. He fights cancel culture. How does he fight cancel culture? Well, first, by canceling people, right? If you're gonna fight cancel culture, you gotta be one to, you gotta know what you know thy enemy, right? Sun Tzu, first rule of art of war, like know thy enemy, guys. This is why Erin O'Toole is such a great leader. Erin O'Toole knows how to fight cancel culture because he's the best at it. Right? First, he cancels Jim Kalaharos. Jim Kalaharos says, hey, why does your campaign chair advocating for Sharia law in Canada? And they're like, cancel him. I'm against cancel culture, right? Cancel Jim Kalaharos. Then he's like, you know what? This Daniel Boardman kid, what's he doing? Saying the news? Sue him. All right, great. Fighting cancel culture. Then Derek Sloan, let's just instigate an inside hit job, cancel him. So Erin O'Toole, prolific canceller, is going to fight cancel culture and fight for freedom of speech. Guys, and if you don't believe that Erin O'Toole is going to fight for free speech, you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist. And Erin O'Toole is so strong, he's going to fight Bill C-10, he's going to fight, and nothing bad will ever happen in Canada as long as Erin O'Toole is in charge. Wait, show Erin O'Toole's most recent tweet. What is he saying now? Okay, just announced, we will repeal Bill C-10 to protect your right to free speech. Conservative government will repeal Bill C-10 to protect free speech. Erin, I'm going to take this off now. Bill C-10 hasn't passed yet. It is not passed yet. Here's Erin O'Toole saying, yeah, you know what? We're just going to let it pass, and then we're going to use it as an election issue, and claim to repeal Bill C-10. So there's many problems with this. One, you effing cowards. I hate you so much. Two, like this is there's more than just Bill C-10. And there are other attacks on free speech. We went over the other bill, like the current hate speech one, where they're going to try and ban hate speech and terrorism and revenge porn all under one big umbrella. And I have said there are things like we do need laws against revenge porn. Like, don't get me wrong, there are no laws on the books against, your ex-girlfriend sends you some nude Snapchats, whatever, you screenshot them, she breaks your heart because, she doesn't like your choice of socks. Your socks don't match, so she breaks up with you. And you're like, that bitch. And then you post her nude photos online and her name. That should be a crime. You just go to jail. And we didn't. So John A. McDonald didn't say anything about that. Should he have? Probably. Are we gonna crucify him for it? Probably. Is it a reasonable criticism? No, there was no internet in 1867, but that hasn't stopped the left from being lunatics anyways. So there are more attacks on free speech than just Bill C-10. Bill C-10 is the most politically correct and simplest way for the conservative government to criticize it, because it just tries to put things under the CRTC rule, which everyone hates. There's no other complexities. So they're ignoring all other assaults on free speech, focusing in on C-10 as the one thing they can fight. And then the one thing they can fight, they're just admitted they're not going to fight it. Listen, yes, I know you're the opposition. You don't have control of the government, but it's not a majority government. Your job as a Conservative Party is to rally opposition to this bill, force the NDP to not back it, or put them in a position that if they do back it as the NDP, it makes them so unpopular that you can then win the election and repeal. Instead of just saying, we're going to let it pass so we can use it as an election issue anyway. These people are so dumb and so cowardly. It blows my mind. It just blows my mind how stupid the Conservative Party is, how cowardly they are. Actually, it doesn't. I'm totally used to it now. I'm just kind of doing this for effect. I am not surprised. This is like so par for the course. Totally expected. But still, Still upsetting. It's still maddening to see that Erin O'Toole is doing this. And then the other thing, and they're not even fighting it. Like, you want fundamental proof that Erin O'Toole doesn't care about free speech, other than the fact that he clearly doesn't care about free speech, and two of the people in his friggin' senior campaign staff are suing me for reporting on their campaign, and Jim Collarhouse and Derek Sloan and all that. Fundamental proof is their plan was just to put an amendment under the bill to make sure that they can, the conservatives are fine with them sort of putting restrictions and putting corporations on the CRTC, but not individual people. And that sounds like it's progress, unless you know anything about how these internet companies work. Like, of course, that's the big thing, is the thing on corporations. That's how they want to censor you, right? Is by putting rules on YouTube and then forcing YouTube to censor civilians and individuals to comply with the government standards set upon YouTube. And the Conservative Party knows this. I don't believe they're all stupid. I think most of them are stupid. I've talked to a lot of them. They seem either ignorant or idiotic, or just straight up terror sympathizers. But this is the thing, right? If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook right now, they could say, yes, Daniel Boardman is an individual, maybe I'm above or below. They're like 20,000 followers. Okay, therefore he counts as a corporation. So he's under the bill. Okay, fine. He's under 50,000 or he's not a full corporation anyway. It doesn't matter the number. Jordan Peterson has millions and Daniel Boardman has a couple thousand. So they're both individuals. So theoretically, we're not regulated. But we are. We're just indirectly regulated by the federal government. That was always the problem. The federal government had no enforcement mechanism over individuals anyway. So yes, there was parts where they wanted to be in charge of individuals' feeds and control, but ultimately the government has no enforcement mechanism or no way of monitoring individual use of social media. That was never the goal. The goal was always to put YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, MeWe, whatever else platform you're on, follow me there. Their goal was always to put those things under federal guidelines, have a federal enforcement mechanism against YouTube, and then force YouTube to then implement those standards the federal government imposed upon it onto the people. That was always the game. That was always the goal of Bill C-10, was always the corporate censorship, right? The Liberals just got over greedy and put in, and people too, even though there's no enforcement mechanism. Now, the Liberals just wanted to tip that because the Liberals are so cocky and authoritarian and will literally source themselves. Like, they have government-funded media watch groups that get government subsidies, and they'll say, yeah, the Liberal government's media is regulation. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Best laws ever. Totally amazing laws. So it's just so dumb. It's just so dumb that Erin O'Toole, so at first, you know what? God bless Pierre Poilievre for trying to get out there and raise the issue on this and being the only one to actually bring sort of succinct recognition of the actual problems here. So I'm not going to rag on Pierre here, because Pierre has to work as a team or whatever bullshit they'll tell you that he has to do. I get it, but everyone else inside the Conservative Party is an abject moral failure and coward. Abject, because they totally capitulate this. These people will rah. Look, the Liberals are so bad on this Bill C-10, but they're only willing to sort of dip their tippy toe in the pool of potential freedom, and momentarily. And it's just so transparent to anyone who actually understands anything about this. And you see, they're going to regulate YouTube, but don't worry, they're not going to regulate. It will mean nothing for the people on YouTube. Right? How stupid do you have to believe that? And the Liberals think you're very stupid because they actually tell people that, you're going to make money off the carbon tax. And then the CBC will repeat that lie. You know what? Most Canadians will make money off the carbon tax. And it's like, okay, I got a bridge to sell you if you believe that. All right. I can't help you if you believe that the government will put restrictions and laws and regulations onto YouTube, but don't worry, that won't affect anyone who uses YouTube. If you believe that, a lobotomy can only make you smarter. That's where we are. And, hopefully, no one here, really needs that, but, hey, come on. It's just so stupid. It's just so stupid. Now, good news. on the cancel culture front. The CBC lost a frivolous lawsuit to the CPC. So the CBC sued the Conservative Party last election for using CBC clips that show Justin Trudeau in a negative light. And then the CBC sued the Conservative Party for using those clips. And then this lawsuit was just thrown out because it had absolutely no grounds anyway. But the CBC decided to commit some sort of lawfare attack on the Conservative Party just because they felt like it would be a means to hurt them. So, and this is the circle of life. So the Conservative Party is the subject of frivolous lawfare from the Liberal allies. And they complain, this is an assault on free speech. This is just, intimidation and censorship through other means. True. Then they come around and they sue me for doing whatever it is I'm doing now. Twice. Right? Circle of life. Right? The Liberals sue the Conservatives for being slightly to the right of them. The Conservatives then sue me for being to the right of the left. And the circle stops there, because I'm not going to sue anyone for making a video about me, right? Go for it. Like, have fun. If there's some like Palestinian activist who wants to, call me some sort of Zionist baby killer, have fun. Make the video. Go for it. Thumbs up. Smile for the camera. Use that as a thumbnail. Here's me holding a spoon. Right, there you go. Caught me. I held spoons, and that's a Zionist spoon. I was just holding up a big Zionist spoon. There you go. Thumbnail, snapshot, snap face, do whatever. Okay. So that's where we are for Canadian news. Now, there's big developments in Israel, Gaza, whatever. And I'll say, okay, so I will sort of monitor the chat, and if there's any questions on the thing, I guess producer just bring them up. I'll use this time. Any questions you have about any specific issues relating to Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, whatever it is, because the media is never going to answer these questions for you. I feel like if you're here, you're watching the show, and you want if there's some part of the conflict, some history thing that you just don't understand, want an explanation to, I figure that will be my thing. This will be the show where you feel like you can just come on and I'll help you out, give you a hand, and try my best to explain that thing. As long as it's an honest ask question, I'll go for it. Okay, so the most recent development is ground troops are going to go into Gaza. Now, this is being sold by the Toronto Star and others as a major escalation in the conflict. Israel is escalating by sending ground troops into Gaza. So over 1,000 rockets are launched over 1,000 rockets are being launched from the Gaza Strip into Israel. And the fact that Israel is sending in a response to this is the escalation, right? This is how the media plays it. However, nothing can be further from the truth. Like, I'm actually against using the ground troops here because it's just a game. It's a Band-Aid solution. So this is a nice thing Israel is doing, is sending in ground troops. And this is going to be weaponized. Oh, he said it's a nice thing they're sending in ground troops. Yeah. It's their basic humanity. They want to avoid civilian casualties. Someone needs to protect the civilians and the Palestinians, and it's going to be the IDF. And people are going to call me crazy for saying that, but think of it this way, all right? And everyone knows this. If Israel wanted to commit a genocide and ethnic cleansing, what's stopping them? No, seriously. If Israel wanted to wipe the Arabs and the Palestinians in Gaza off the map, what's stopping them? They could do it. They could do it by the end of the night. Right? I guess it's 7 hours ahead in Israel. So it's already tomorrow there. Right? So it's what, May 14th in Israel? By May 15th, midnight, May 15th in Israel, if the Israelis wanted to, they could destroy Gaza, turn it into a parking lot and kill over half the civilians there and force the rest of them out. They could do that within a day. All it would take is just bombing from the air. They have total air superiority. Every time those missiles launch, they could just bomb it. They could level the entire place. They can level Gaza right now and pound it down under a day. It'll all be done. If you really want to genocide and ethnic cleanse the Palestinians, it can be done in under a day. Total air superiority, modern weaponry, high explosives, blow it up, you're done. The reason why they're not doing that is because they have a soul and they don't want to, innocent civilians to die. Will Trudeau lift a finger to help Israel, in your opinion? Sorry for you to cover that question. No, I didn't. That's a good question. Will Trudeau lift a finger to help Israel? The answer is no. And I'll finish this point and then I'll go into that one. So the reason why they're sending ground troops into Gaza is because with troops on the ground, you can be more selective. You can move civilians away, and then you can go after actual targets and weapon stores. So if you have, weapons stored underneath the hospital or in the kindergarten, you can't just bomb the kindergarten where kids are in class and the Hamas forces the kids there, because then the international people are like, oh, you force that. But if you actually take soldiers there, you can forcibly move the civilians out, capture the weapon stores, and then blow them up. This means a lot more Israelis will die. This is Israel choosing to risk the lives of their own citizens and soldiers. More Israelis will die to mitigate the loss of Palestinian life, and the world will hate them for it. And this is what's going on. And it's so dishonest, being played so dishonestly by the media, right? It's an escalation. And it's a courtesy. And you're not going to say like, oh, there should be no troops in Gaza at all. Well, then stop launching rockets. And Gaza isn't even connected to the West Bank and Jerusalem. Like this whole Jerusalem thing, that's West Bank stuff. Al-Aqsa Mosque, Sheikh Jarrah, all of that's in the West Bank. None of this had anything to do with Gaza. The occupation, there is no occupation of Gaza. The Israelis withdrew everyone from Gaza. As I said, Israel has committed ethnic cleansing in the past. In 2005, they forcibly removed every Jew from Gaza because of this false notion that the only reason Palestinians are angry is because they see Jews. And it's a major affront to any Palestinian or any Arab. If they see a Jew and a Jew lives near them, what are they supposed to do? How are you supposed to react if you see a Jew? Are you not supposed to react with missiles and murder? What do you expect of them? This is the narrative, the pro-Palestinian narrative from the left. Is its instigation. The very fact that Jews exist is an instigating incident that incites violence. This is the great lie here. Now, so will Justin Trudeau lift a finger to help Israel? No. Justin Trudeau has already pushed out. Now, Justin Trudeau's, although I don't think he believes it, but Justin Trudeau is going to be the last liberal leader that is even remotely pro-Israel. There's going to be a massive shift in the Liberal Party soon. And you're seeing it, and Jagmeet Singh is already doing it. Oh, my producer made a good point. Trudeau wouldn't lift a finger to stop Iran from killing Canadians. So what are the odds that he's going to lift a finger to help Israel to aid them? So no, again, Justin Trudeau won't lift a finger to stop terrorists from killing Canadians. What's he going to do when terrorists are killing our allies like Trudeau? It's a great point. What's going to happen in Canadian politics, and I think you'll see a lot more leftist politics go this way as well, is the Corbynization. Now, there might be clever, and the establishment might want to stop this, but there is sort of specific political entropy. There is some political entropy that will enable the anti-Semitism to rise within the establishment political left. Now, the reason why the establishment doesn't want a Jeremy Corbyn coming through the Liberal Party is because it's actually deeply unpopular. Most people, when they see Jeremy Corbyn laying the wraith he will literally go to the funeral and lay a wraith flowers at the grave of terrorists who are not they broke into a synagogue and murdered civilians inside a synagogue, that type of terrorist, PFLP, Islamic Jihad, that level terrorist. Jeremy Corbyn he calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends who are fighting for social justice. Those are legitimate terrorist organizations. This is not popular with the mainstream public. So yes, it will completely withdraw Jewish support from Labour and the Liberals, but there is some political entropy that's going to happen within the Liberal Party. And the political entropy is this, right? You're taking in 25,000, it was actually 50,000 Syrian refugees. Around 90% of Syrian people hold deeply anti-Semitic views. Around 90% of most people in the Middle East. Now, those numbers are going down in the UAE and Bahrain and certain places, but a lot of countries in the Middle East, and a lot of countries that are, let's just be honest, Muslim majority countries, have 80 to 90% people holding deeply anti-Semitic views. And most of our immigration is coming from those places. These places, people are now voters, which means the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic vote is pretty strong. And I've said this as well. Eventually, the left and the liberals are going to do the political calculation that there are more anti-Semites in our party than there are Jews. So this is what they're going to do. What they're going to do in the political entropy here is, in a primary, right? The wisdom of a primary is you run to the left or the right, you run to the polls, and then in the general, you run to the center, right? This is the old narrative of the primaries. Now, it's getting harder to do as everything's cataloged. But in a free-for-all leadership race with all the Muslim Brotherhood groups and, Islamo-fascists circling around the Liberal Party, to win leadership, Now, you might not be popular with the general population, but to win leadership races, you need to sort of corral certain fringe elements. So the anti-Israel vote is going to be a big, major factor in the next liberal leadership election. Like, you're going to see a very dramatic shift inside the party establishment towards Israel and Jews in the next liberal leadership. So once Trudeau steps aside and the next liberal leadership race happens, you're going to see the rise of a Corbynite candidate. You're going to see a candidate who didn't have, right now the party wants Chrysler Freeland or Mark Carney. Navdeep Bains is a big player until he resigned for no reason whatsoever. There's nothing there. I don't have 50 million reasons why Navdeep Bains. Great Karen. Trudeau funded UNRWA, hate education of Palestinian kids. Did Hamas use the 70 million on bombs? Most likely, not all 70 million on bombs. A lot of it was to pay salaries of people who commit bombs, but most of that, again, is used for terrorism. So UNRWA, United Nations Refugee. What people need to know about UNRWA is a specific program designed to help Palestinian refugees. And Palestinian refugees are not refugees. And you can see this because there's a different definition for refugee. So UNRWA deals with Palestinian refugees, and the UNHCR deals with refugees. So a lot of you, might not like either organization, but the UNHCR, that as the United Nations Refugee Department, and they have specific, definitions of what a refugee is. And when we talk about refugees, the UNHCR definition is generally accepted, and their definition is essentially a refugee. It's displaced from conflict due to this many years of whatever there. UNRWA has a completely different definition for what a Palestinian refugee is. And this is why these people aren't refugees. And this is why Israel keeps creating, this is why the media can say, well, Israel just created 1 million more refugees this year. And this is how it works. Okay, so this is how UNRWA works. The definition of a Palestinian refugee is anyone who had a family member who was living in Israel for 2 years between the periods of 1919 and 1949 and no longer lives there anymore. So that's the definition of refugee. So you are a Palestinian refugee. This person's a Palestinian refugee, by the way. Now I'm going to create a fictional person, okay? Your great-great-grandfather. He is an Arab born in what is now modern-day northeast Jordan. Then there is a Jewish farmer who buys some land in 1920 in what is British Mandatory Palestine, modern-day Israel. He buys some land there. He's hiring workers. You get better wages there than anywhere else in the Middle East because the Ottoman Empire is running their show like a bunch of idiots who suck at commerce. This is actually true. And this happened a lot, massive immigration. Once the evil Zionists started buying up land in Israel, lots of Arabs came in for jobs. And so most of the Palestinians who were displaced by Israeli and Zionist aggression actually moved there to get jobs from the Zionists who bought land off the Ottomans. But I digress. So you come and you work on a farm, a Jewish farmer. You're employed for, let's say, 3 years. 3 years, you work there on a farm between 1922 and 1925. You meet the love of your life, Fatima McMatima, and she's just a lovely smoke show. You get married. You then move back to Jordan. You have some kids, in 1949, and then they're born. Well, you know what? You've been displaced by the Jews. You're a Palestinian refugee. That kid, your grandfather, is a Palestinian refugee. Your grandfather then moves out of Jordan, moves to, France, has a great life in France, makes a name for himself, starts a real big business, right? And then he's a wealthy person, and then boom, he has a child with a white French woman. They have a child in 1982. Boom, that kid born in France in 1982, that is counted as a Palestinian refugee by the UN UNRWA. Not joking. That child then grows up in a life of luxury and wealth in France with half Palestinian blood. He then marries a princess of Liechtenstein. That child, your father, marries the princess of Liechtenstein. You then live as a life of a billionaire and a princess. You're a billionaire royal family person. You are then born. You know what you are? You're a prince. You're a billionaire, but you are also legally considered a Palestinian refugee. Not joking, this is UNRWA, okay? So that's just the UNRWA definition. This is why there's always billions and billions and billions of Palestinian refugees, and then the Palestinian refugees get 4 times the amount of funding that normal refugees get. And you pay for this with your tax money. You need to fund these refugees. Now, some Palestinian refugees are actually refugees from 1948 who like are living in refugee camps still in Lebanon. Like, I love the Lebanon stands with Palestine stuff, because in Lebanon, you're legally, like when they talk about open air prisons, in Gaza is an open air prison. No. Lebanese Palestinian refugee camps are open air prisons until the 1990s. People were there from 1940 to 1990. Until 1990s, Palestinians were not allowed to leave their refugee camps in Lebanon. Now, they had to relax that once it started being used against them, but Palestinians still don't have full legal rights in most Arab countries. You want to talk about apartheid for Palestinians? Israel is the only country where Arabs or Palestinians have any sort of equal legal rights. It's the only country that don't face actual legal apartheid in the Middle East. Look it up. All right, so you have UNRWA, which gets tons and tons of money because this refugee crisis is out of control. Because every time someone who had a great-great-grandparent who lived in Israel for 2 years between between the 1920s and 1940s, every one of those kids, even if they're born to a princess and a billionaire in Liechtenstein, is a Palestinian refugee. And then we use our tax dollars. Yeah, Trudeau gives $80 million to these people because we need to fund the Palestinian refugees. Now, the UNRWA gets millions and millions of dollars for this. They have no interest in making the conflict better because they get 4 times the amount of funding per refugee that a normal refugee gets, right? So they're highly subsidized. Now, in the Palestinian territories, UNRWA is, of course, compromised with tons of Hamas operatives. So there have been stories of UNRWA schools. So we build these schools, and there have been documentaries. These schools are being used to promote jihadist propaganda, to teach kids to kill Jews, to teach them about global jihad, all your ISIS or Hamas classics. Now, there have been stories of bombs being used, and UNRWA schools, like, again, UNRWA institutions do have like tunnels built under them, like attack tunnels going into Israel. So this is actually a problem, and you fund this. This is why I try and raise the issue. It's like, you are actually funding a lot of this nonsense. When we fund UNRWA, and Justin Trudeau, Stephen Harper, there was a report, UNRWA's corrupt, it funds terrorism, it advocates for terrorism. So Stephen Harper took away the funding, Donald Trump took away their funding, but Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden have restored their funding. So when you have an organization that gets 4 times the amount of funding per refugee that a normal refugee gets, and then there's no way to ever not become a refugee, these people are perpetually refugees and basically kept as cash cows, right? Even if you're a prince born in Liechtenstein of a billionaire, you're still a refugee. You see where I'm going here, right? Then these people cooperate with Hamas, right? And because Hamas basically controls it, the money funding into UNRWA, yes, some of it's used to build a school, but then, half of it is used to build arms and weapons. And a lot of the weapons funding comes from Iran too. Iran has a vested interest, and they'll admit that Iran buys all these weapons for them too, right? So this is the nonsense of the narrative. If Trump was reelected, will we be seeing this right now? No. And the answer is no. Good question off. And the reason why you would not be seeing this if Trump was elected is because Donald Trump was very good at cutting off the money funding in to do this, okay? You guys might not be brilliant military strategists and leaders, but you know that rockets are expensive. Even if they're low-grade rockets, you know that it costs lots of money to fire rockets. War is expensive. I don't think I'm breaking any big news to you here on that front. And the reason why Trump was really good at tamping down war in the Middle East, yes, there was the peace deals and whatever, but what Trump did a very good job of is cutting off the flow of money to people who are funding conflicts in the Middle East. It's a very simple strategy and a very effective strategy. No, Joe Biden and Barack Obama had a very different strategy. And his strategy was to give lots of money to people who say they will use that money to fund conflicts in the Middle East. And that's why you got lots of conflicts in the Middle East. I know it's a shocking thing. I know if Senator Andy Blinken, whatever, and Joe Biden's cabinet is watching right now. So Daniel is saying if we give money to people who say there's going to use that money to buy weapons to create conflicts, they're going to use that money to buy weapons and create conflict. That can't be true. But it actually is. So the reason why you wouldn't see this happening under Trump is a lot of these rockets, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that's one of the political parties there. They're fully controlled by Iran. Hamas is like funded by Iran, but not controlled by Iran. They hate Iran, but they need its money. They'd rather the Muslim Brotherhood be in charge, but you got to deal with what we got to deal with. And the reason why Iran loves funding this conflict is, one, they're anti-Semites, but there's also this sort of internal competition within Middle Eastern states, and this is changing under Trump. But Iran was so anti-Israel and anti-Semitic because it's kind of a chest-beating thing because they're Shia and the majority of the Islamic world is Sunni. So in order to sort of gain credibility with a lot of the Islamic world, they tried to do so by proving they're the most Muslim by being the most anti-Semitic. So they kind of need to sort of chest beat on this. And okay, so what Iran specifically does is and the Quds Force will say this, they say that their goal is to create a global caliphate. And the way the Quds Force works is they take money and they will fund what they call pockets of resistance all over the world. So the Houthis in Yemen, militant groups in West Africa, and Islamic Jihad and Hamas in the Palestinian territories, they will fund these groups because they want conflict. Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, they want conflict and chaos. So Joe Biden came in and he's reduced the sanctions on Iran. So they freed up lots of money going into Iran. Now that Iran has billions of dollars, they don't use that money to help their domestic economy. They use that money to take over the world. So when you free up tons of money to Iran, and Iran uses that money to fund rockets for Hezbollah and Hamas, well, then Hezbollah and Hamas have a lot more rockets to fire. Right? So yes, this is how it goes. And then when you give money to UNRWA, which is also connected to Hamas, they'd have more money for rockets. Right? This is what they do with their money. They use their money to build rockets and fire them at Israel. So that was the number one thing why, Trump stopped these conflicts from happening, is because he cut off the money to these areas. And then he was even good and said, if you want to participate this, and he went into the Europeans, hey, stupid European nations, yeah, France and Germany, I'm looking at you, stupid Europeans, freaking EU. You want to fund these guys? No, we'll put sanctions on you too. And he basically said, no funding terrorism. And the Europeans like, no, but we want to fund the terrorism and then complain about how racist America is and fund all these terrorist groups that hate us. And they're like, no, you cannot do that. And then the Europeans get on and say like, oh, multiculturalism has failed. We have a problem with Islamic extremism. But can we fund Islamic extremism all over the world? Can we please? So shut up, EU. Just shut up. And Trump was really good at this. He stopped the money from going to terrorists and stopped money from going to governments that want to send money to terrorists. And therefore, terrorist groups had a lot less money. And when the terrorist groups don't have money to buy rockets, they can't buy rockets. And if they can't buy rockets, they can't fire rockets into Israel. But now that Biden freed up the cash flow, they have a lot of rockets to fire in. So you've seen a massive salvo, and here's how the cycle works. Hamas fires thousands of rockets funded by Iran or your idiot charities and do-gooders in North America. They fire thousands of rockets, and then they want a ceasefire. They declare ceasefire, right, when Israel's about to retaliate, and then Israel goes, no, we have to take them out. And the reason why they cry ceasefire is let's say, threefold. Okay, one, propaganda. They want to claim that they're trying to be like, we offered a ceasefire, but Israel didn't take us. That's totally disingenuous. Okay, two, it's not really a ceasefire, it's a reload, right? Once they start to get low on munitions, they then cry ceasefire, because what they want is a ceasefire, a lull in intentions. Then they want to sort of dupe the do-gooders in North America to raise money through Islamic Relief or whatever other Muslim Brotherhood organization for Palestinian relief. That money then goes into the government. The government then has a big, like, oh, good, we need to rebuild Gaza. See, all these buildings came down because Israel returned fire. We need the money to rebuild those buildings. They then get money from idiots and do-gooders in the UN. Most of that money then goes to buy more rockets. So then they have more rockets. Then they fire more rockets at Israel. And then when they run low on rockets, they go ceasefire. And then they can continue again. So it's not a ceasefire, they're asking for a reload. And three, they don't actually want a ceasefire, and they know a ceasefire is impossible. So they know they can play this game because, as I told you, Hamas is like the real power in Gaza, but there's also a group called Islamic Jihad, which doesn't really have the popular support of the Palestinian people. Not a lot of people, like, they're Shiite, most of the thing is Sunni, but they're a direct Iran proxy, and Hamas has to let them exist because they need money from Iran. So they're directly Iran's hand. So even if Hamas goes into negotiation with Israel, they know that Palestinian Islamic Jihad will continue to fire rockets into Israel even during a ceasefire, because they take their orders from Iran, and Iran doesn't want a ceasefire. So they know that Israel can keep, right? They can say ceasefire, they can say we're not firing, and they can take a day off firing to reload, right? Knowing that Islamic Jihad will continue to fire on Israel, right? And then they have to retaliate to Islamic Jihad, and then they can say, well, they didn't respect the ceasefire. It's like, yeah, because there's two groups attacking me. So, like, again, so they know it's impossible to begin with. That's a three thing. And like, the conflict's so messed up. I mean, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, its goal is to make sure peace is never going to happen. And that's something we don't talk enough about. For example, like, one of the big flashpoints and big things they were fighting over a few years ago, and this is during the March of Return stuff, is there's a claim that, Israel's trying to blockade Gaza and Israel's trying to starve out Gaza. Okay, one of the biggest conflict hotspots in the Gaza territories for the last few years is the Karim Shalom humanitarian passing. So Gaza calls Gaza a super state, like the greatest state that ever exists, because they declared war on Israel. They don't produce any of their stuff, but they're completely funded, and Israel gives them food and gas, like all their energy, food, like all of it is provided for free by Israel. Like Palestinians get free healthcare and free everything, right, from Israel. And one of the big war points is it comes through this one crossing Karim Shalom, like that's where the Israeli aid comes in to feed the Palestinian people. One of the biggest flashpoints is Israel actually defending that crossing from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So Islamic Jihad, what they like to do is launch attacks on that crossing, which brings in the aid from Israel, because what they want is they want to show pictures of, look how bad Israel is. They want to do the propaganda of, look, starving children, Gaza, blah, 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 blah. This is the game they want to play. So because they specifically attack humanitarian crossings and aid going to the Palestinian people, they can then have these pictures come up on Al Jazeera about, look at the starvation. And of course, the Toronto Star is never going to cover the fact that Palestinian terrorist militants are attacking the aid trucks, and the Israelis are fighting off terrorists to try and get food and energy and supplies to the Palestinian people. That will never be covered in the media because, hurts the narrative too much. So this is kind of what we're dealing with right now. So I'll just do another little peruse through the comment section, see if there's anything else in there. Okay, it looks like I covered most of it. We've hit an hour. So I don't even know if this feed's being kept up to normal. But thank you so much if you've enjoyed tonight's stream. Remember to like and hit the subscribe and do the whatever. I think I covered all the specific questions. Thanks to everyone who's participated in this stream. Like the video, share the video, blah blah blah. Subscribe to the whatever. If you want to support the show, donate to me on Patreon or PayPal or whatever. Or get a tattoo of my face onto your face. Let your family know that you're really committed to the cause. And every Wednesday, next Wednesday will be a lot better because my 7-day ban for saying Hitler was bad will be up. By the way, I'm still in the impression Hitler is still bad. So if Facebook wants to give me a double violation for saying Hitler bad, genocide bad, Holocaust bad, too bad, it's still bad. So I've been me, you've been you. I will see you next Wednesday at